me just double check. I'm streaming on YouTube now. Yeah, I got it like 2 or 3 years ago. And you know, I work on the ambulance, so I really couldn't come into work. Um,
That would be bad.
yeah, you'd be like spreading the goodness of the world, one sneeze at a time. Um, like spreading the. Okay, cool. So we're good on YouTube. Uh, so anyway, yeah, no, it was I was going out to bars and hang because I had just moved to Houston. So I was like, what do you do when you move to a new city and stuff? I was like, you go out and mingle with the population. And so anyway, I wasn't really
Ooh.
that concerned about it. I felt like I was like, you know, I didn't. Yeah, I thought I was gonna be okay, and I was, and I ended up getting it, but my side effects from the strains that I got was just really tired. And I had a headache. That was about it. Just tired with a headache. So it was just like a bad hangover, sort of, or like a bad cold, I guess you could say. But I didn't have any like sinus infection or respiratory issues, so that was good. But anyway, so yeah, that's when you said you had
Yeah.
it. I was like surprised. I was like, damn, I haven't heard of anybody having it for. It's been a while since I've heard of anybody actually catching it. You know, so. Um, but hold on a second. What? I'm having trouble with this. Oh. Okay, there we go. I'm just trying to get my thumbnail going there. Save this. Okay, we're good. So anyway, but yeah, man. I got a track here that I was working on, and I noticed a couple things in your video that you were doing. That you had a harmer, and then you had a citrus, and you were talking about creating like the fattest possible base, essentially, and you used the citrus to do that, and then you added some. Looks like you added some harmonics to it just to make it like in the ideal range of like perfectly fat.
Yep.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that. That was pretty cool. And then you were talking about how you changed the phase offset just a little bit, and then put it at a certain point, and I could actually hear it in my headphones really well. But you could definitely tell like the point at which you put it was like the maximal amount of. It was like perfect phase starting point for bass. I was like, God damn, that's fat.
It was very, yeah, it's very, it's not subtle when it works. It's very, like, you can tell it's more than what it was a second ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess you were saying we had talked about this earlier. So at one point I want to let me share my screen. That might actually help. I got a new computer too, so I'm pretty hyped about that. It's I can actually
The
like
computer hype?
yeah, I can actually like live stream decently now. Do I have to? Oh, I have to show you the. Okay, it's been a while since I've done this. I think that's what I need to do. Okay, I'm gonna close this window. Close this because I got two FLs open right now. Huh? Okay. All right. So anyway, a couple things. I got this track. I'll play it for you and let you kind of get the gist of it. But I guess one thing I'm trying to understand is this is sort of like a new genre for me, and I'm trying to get the bass down right, essentially. So I feel like what I want to do on this track is put a couple of different types of basses, and then I want to have a breakdown portion where it does some like cool, crazy bassy stuff, you know, and
Yeah.
and then also just kind of get all the right elements. But I feel it's mostly with the bass. So anyway, I'll go ahead back over here and start it off for you. Stand by. That wasn't supposed to be in there. That was really loud, and I don't know what the hell that was. Hold on a second. What in God's name was that fucking noise that came in? Hold on a second. You heard that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Your lead.
I think it was this one. What is this noise that's playing there? Oh, it's citrus. Let me turn this off. Yeah. Okay. Let me try that again. That's pretty much the gist of it right there.
All right, that's a nice groove.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
I like the way the kick has that curve to it.
Oh, sweetness, sweetness. Good kick sample selection, I guess. It was I think it's a pack I got from Loot Masters. It was halftime sample pack. Yeah, I had a buddy. I was showing him some different tracks I had made, and then he was like, "You should try halftime." And I don't know if this is actually halftime or what. I think it's probably a little fast for halftime, but anyway.
Well, it works.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds all right. So, anyway, any off the top, any areas, problems that you could identify?
Well, I would try and make the intro a little bit more enigmatic. I would try and hide things, you know, like not like have the vocal just on.
Oh yeah.
Or
Okay.
Imagine you being cute with it and like sort of hide stuff behind weird effects and like come moshed. It's usually like a whole class of effects that's really only there at the very beginning and maybe later if you do the breakdown with the same stuff.
Okay.
But it's just obscure stuff.
Yeah, I got
Act
you.
like act like you're doing your remix of your own track right now. You're treating it with like oh, you know this is coming. Like they don't yet, but they will.
Okay, so create this sort of, and I kind of was, that was sort of in the game plan eventually, but that is a good point to make there, that create, instead of just coming in just regular and dry with this vocal sample, sort of create this suspenseful, like, oh, something's coming down the line here, but it's slowly revealing itself of what it is, you know, and we're trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I figured I could probably just throw it, like, resample it and throw it in Harmor, and then, you know, modulate all these parameters to sort of, you know, chorus, filter, and all that good stuff. And that's how I usually go about it. What, in your opinion, what is a good way? How would you go about doing that sort of thing? Would you throw it in Harmor, or would you just kind of load up a bunch of different effects in the Fruity Mixer channel?
Well, the bunch of effects approach is usually the fastest, just because like with the thing that I would do in Harmer would be to do a lot of things that are just kind of like basic effects, but with additive edge to it.
Oh, okay.
Like you could use the harmonic blur inside Harmer to act like a big reverb smear, and the big reverb smear is usually one of the first things I do for anything I'm trying to be like, here comes something new and weird. You don't know what it is. It's foggy. Reverb.
Fuck. Gotcha. Let me see. Oh yeah. So on a previous stream we had talked. There was a. I was talking about transient, getting transients to really hit harder, and I had been using. Let's see. Let me see if I can find an example. Okay, so snare number 2. Let me go to snare number 2. Where's snare number 2? No, that's. Okay, there it is. And you were telling me how when you don't use transient processor to enhance your transients, you do it another way. And I was curious, how do you do that?
Well, I just use normal. It's just compressors. Like a transient processor is a compressor with an edge to it.
Oh,
a
okay.
particular edge. Like, and so like you could do the same things with Maximus just fine with the curvatures, with the way that you draw the curves.
Gotcha.
And it'll sort of react. It's not exactly the same, but it's about getting to a particular result. And I have a lot more workflow memory for doing it using Maximus than I do transient processing.
Gotcha. Would it be like something like wait a second,
Yeah.
like essentially like that, getting the really front end and then causing something like that, right?
And then yeah, with the adjustments in time, the attack, release, sustain knobs are going to really matter because like the shape isn't exactly doing what it's doing, but it will if you make it fast enough.
It's interesting. It creates a much thinner snare when I turn the release up like that. That's interesting.
Yeah, so that's the tool landscape I tend to use to do the job of what transmitter processing is, if that's the thing I'm doing.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So, is that creating when I can see the line? It's a very thick line right there, as opposed to that right there. So, is that distortion happening right there?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
But would you consider that bad distortion? Does it sound bad to your ear? Because I guess that's one thing you talked to me about, and that's one thing I've been trying to understand. You had told me that when you see that white line, that's essentially distortion, and I was trying to figure out, like, is that a bad thing? Or when is that a bad thing? When is that a good thing?
It would be a bad thing if this wasn't a percussion. Because it's percussion, like the inharmonic nature of it doesn't matter because it's only inharmonic.
Okay.
But if it were like a voice or something, you could tell because it would break.
Gotcha.
But that's also the point ultimately is can you tell, and whether or not whatever it's doing. So big time. This is why I'm always trying to like use the speed control of automation on the release times for like big stuff like masters because there's moments where like if the big hits that are doing it are like the kick and snare. And those are the only times that's that fast that it actually works out. And that's usually it.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, let's see here. So I'll just
there's another angle on that in the Maximus, which is that if you click on the little drop down arrow in the main there, you get yourself oversampling as an option.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are going to be that fast, then you want to have that on because then that'll help the aliasing problem, and the distortion won't be so like specifically bad.
Okay. Now, oversampling, is that something that I mean I know this is a pretty fast computer. Does that hog up a lot of? Does that cause latency for one, and does that cause a moderate CPU spike, or not something to be worried about?
Individually, not something to be worried about, but the answer is yes. It does introduce. It's like using the HQ mode in an equalizer. Same idea.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Cool.
So then PDC will be engaged and the stuff will be all realigned and whatever, but it is still doing it.
Oh, okay. So I guess maybe that I guess one of two ways. I could either bounce it to a sample and then just be like, okay, I don't have that problem now because it's a sample now. Or Yeah, yeah. Or just at the very end of the track, enable it, and when I go to render the entire track, So, okay, cool, cool. Sweetness. Let me see. Oh, curious. Do you know when FL21, what its release date, estimated time will be?
All I can think of is this year, and that's not anything they've told me. That's just me observing the history of how their releases tend to go.
Oh, okay.
And I just assumed they want it out this year. Other than that, I have absolutely no idea.
Oh, okay. Cool, cool. Let me see here. What else can I do here? Okay, so the base that is all in here, right? So I think I had used a. Let me see where I can find this. Let's see. This is pattern 13. Okay, yeah. So in this track, I used an 808 sample for the sub, right? And I remember we had also discussed that there's sort of imperfections that come when you use like a sub sample, as opposed to like using citrus or something like that. And then I was gonna say, in this track, would you recommend you going with citrus for perfect bass versus like a sample sub bass?
Well, the sample can be perfect if you sampled it and it was right and it was right tune and you didn't change it ever and didn't touch it, and then all these things that basically say that it's essentially synthesized anyway. So whatever's in this case, if you're going to go that far, I would say that like you probably better off doing the work to have the synthesized version. But like, let's talk about why you would even use that particular technique for a thing.
Okay.
And it's mostly about attempting to give like the most presence and possibility of what feels like a bass without as much level as possible, versus because usually as part of it, larger, bigger, huger, like full spectrum experience to try and like push a thing. But if you're not doing that, if you're not going like full tilt that hard, then you also probably don't have to go that hard on the reinforcement. And you either can just get away with just doing like just a sine wave that's just there, or you can sample it if it sounds okay.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Cool.
The requirement of the big sub, like when I'm doing it in the stream, is because if I didn't do that, eventually later when I go to try and smash it for real, it'll get lost. You would lose the sub's like actual hit presence.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Let me see here. I guess I wrote down just like a hodgepodge of different questions or whatnot. One of the big ones that I want to do. So I have basically all my synths that play in this. I have these buses over here. I got obviously like categorized kick, snare, hats, and all that stuff like that, and they all go over into this drum bus right there. My instruments all land on this one right here. As you can see, I have Ozone Match EQ. Are you familiar with Match EQ?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. There was this technique I saw this guy on YouTube do, where what he does is the reference is is white noise to get that perfect, slope, and then you capture it to what your audio is, and then basically, it sort of tries to mimic that, and it balances it out. And I was thinking, I was like, oh, that's a pretty good technique, and I can definitely tell like a difference in the quality. It sounds brighter and wider in the areas that it needs to. But then I had an idea. I was like, you know what? I feel like when I do this technique, I'll still do it in the future because I think it helps my mixes for certainly. But I also realized like I should probably be making, before I use this technique, I should probably be achieving the closest to a good mix before applying this. Don't rely on this to achieve like a good tonal balance. I should have tonal balance before I get to this stage, and this is just like the final touch. I was wondering what your thoughts are on that.
So here's two thoughts. One thought. The first idea is the plan that this guy came up with is good, and it's the discussion we've had before about like what a like regular flat line looks like, and using this noise profile to do this is another way of getting there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's and then yeah, like you say, like I don't really use this kind of thing because of what you said. I do know that this is the shape that I want to get, and I know how to look at it to see if I'm doing it or not, and that's enough.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But there is a thing you could do to be a bit extra spicy about this, which is not necessarily to use a noise profile, but to actually use a tuned element to put in like the actual root note saw wave of whatever your track is, just a naked that as your reference, and trying to get your EQing things to match that.
Oh,
Because,
okay.
yeah, that's using in my mind tools like these crazy specific like sort of high science options are the kind of damage control you do when you don't have options or when you've tried other stuff and it didn't work. It's like options, not having options, for example, is like when you have a piece of material that like you really don't have enough layers of to change enough of to make the match layer like look like that.
Yeah.
And so then you just gotta use a big like heavy-handed kind of tool, which is just like almost just what like compression is doing, only compressing to a range of behavior versus amplitude spectrum stuff. But yeah, your statement of like you could also just do that right and not have to do that, and then not have to use such crazy high-tech stuff to solve that problem, which like is also not really that much of a problem to begin with. Like the idea that everything that you have could be summed up to a flatness is the next step is that it's not going to be flat. The next step is that you then make it not flat because you get to have a texture, have a feeling and a style, but you also start from what is linear flat. And that's just accessibility. That's just so that people, like when you think you're this far away from linear, like so do other people when they hear it, even though they never heard the linear version.
Okay. Nice.
Because it's just like an average they know.
Yeah, yeah.
But the tuning thing, that's what I would use this for. I would do that to be like, what's my track's key? Go get a sub bass saw wave, put it in there. It's gonna be it'll look kind of the same. It'll still have this flat texture, but it'll be a lot more specific.
Okay. Any particular, what would be the best plugin for getting the most perfect sub bass saw wave? Would you say
Faceplant?
Faceplant would be?
Yes.
Okay. So ideally, then, if I'm gonna be a nutcase about this, is load Faceplant, find the right key, and sample that, and then capture that part, and then apply it to the audio in that instance. And
Yeah, because what's fun about using white noise is that it's a description of flat in the most average possible sense. But you aren't really doing something average. You're doing a piece of music. You're doing a track that has stuff that you've determined.
Yeah.
So you get to use that information as a filler and fit. You get to be like, okay, this is where stuff's gonna be, so fit.
Ah, man. See, man, I'm so glad I talked to you about this stuff, because your level of you always know how to take a thing to like the more specific, advanced level, and I freaking love that, man, because it's like I'm one of those guys. I think I get this from watching too many Seamless videos. I'm like, whoa, look at all this shit you can do, right? And I'm like, ultra specific, and that's, I mean, I'm always on the quest for like anything I can do to achieve a better possible mix, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I like how you're on board with that. You're like, oh yeah, brother.
Well, it's that energy is exactly the way. It's like bodybuilding. Like you are trying to like you're not really doing like overly super productive work while you're doing that kind of thing, because like reaching into the extremes of smashing. Like I'm noticing you have a drum spacer and a vocal spacer. Is that track spacer plug in there?
Yeah, I was using whatchamacallit, just the patcher preset inside FL Studio, but like you had told me that native plugins, a third-party plugin, are way more CPU efficient than using, like patcher with its million freaking EQs.
There's a lot of things to say about that, but Track Spacer itself was also doing it a lot more finely.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, it's a lot more specific than the wet. But like the patcher result is close enough to what the output is that it's able to say that like, okay, you can do that and that's cool. But the thing that Track Spacer could do, like what it's for, like this hyper awesome, basically the side chaining that feels even more transparent than the best timed side chaining that you could do with normal side chaining. And it's one of these things that you think of while you're doing normal side chaining. You're going like, well, what if I could do that? And you go through the phases of like, okay, well, has anyone tried this yet? And then if anyone has, was it a good or bad idea? And my personal experience with using Track Spacer is that it is actually not as good an idea as I thought it was.
Really?
Like, especially coming from what I used to be doing mixing wise before electronic stuff, which was metal stuff, which in my opinion is a little bit harder, and because a lot of this, it's like trying to mix hard style. Like, it's not exactly intuitive in regards to like where all the power's going or why we wanted to feel that way. But it involves a lot of like inter side chaining, a lot of like this thing's frequencies are going into that thing's frequencies, and not so much the whole track crushed that I tend to do for like this stuff, like halftime, whatever. And that even though that was that life, like I wished for these like hyper specific like super future tools. Every time I got my hands on one and it did the thing it's supposed to be for, I discovered that there is actually a cost to being too perfect.
Interesting.
And that cost is usually style.
Style? What do you mean by that?
Like, my early quest for better and better mixing was mostly about making things louder, usually. And because like my progression from like knowledge of music began like, okay, I listened to old funk and jazz, and then I listened to like old metal, and then I listened to new metal, and then I listened to like crazy electronic breakbeats, and then I listened to pendulum, and then I listened to the rest of drum and bass, and now like very just linear progression of incredible loudness.
Oh,
and
yeah.
If you try it as like a producer, be like, okay, well, I'm going to do all my inspirations, and I just want to be like, what feels like better is just means louder. And there's science that says that's pretty much what that is. But other than after that, there's just like your personal taste for it. And my personal taste has always felt like it was louder. But the thing is, it wasn't. It really wasn't just about being louder. There was a whole other changes that mattered. Because when I did eventually get to be like the kind of loud that I wanted to be by way of using this stuff, using the high science tools, and absolutely perfectly carving everything's exact position, it just doesn't sound good. It doesn't actually sound the way that the other things sounded when they did what they were doing, like how loud they were doing it, which, as it turns out, the only reason it appeared linear is because it was that way to me. It was actually completely arbitrary and utter coincidence that happened that way, because individually, they all existed in their actual loudest selves. That had to do with, this was the content, this is how it was, and because it acts this way, it has a limit. And if you exceed it or you stop it, you just stop being the genre. You just stop actually doing the thing.
Yeah, that's such a it's this conversation we're having right now kind of almost makes me think of like quantum. Okay, so I watched this video. It was like a cartoon, but it was this guy, and he was saying that basically they shot these photons through this filter, right? And some of the photons would appear on the other side, and when they did, when they didn't observe it, it came through as like individual little particles. But they said when they actually put somebody on the other side, and the mere act of observing the photons coming through changed it from like particles into a wave, like one giant wave of photons, right? And so kind of makes me think it's almost like what you're talking about is like the fact, like trying to change something to make it perfect and be all complex about it affects the output, the outcome of what the end result, and it makes it you're not getting what you want, even though you would think that all this stuff would make it better, and you're saying to achieve the loudness that your genre that you're trying to do, that doing all these things actually harms that output, and you end up with a different result.
Right, because a lot of the time when you think of what a genre is, what it is really an amalgamation of choices, a bunch of choices that a lot of people made, and for whatever reason, or sometimes it's because, other times there's just like they're just doing what they can, and in your attempts to recreate it at all, not just like, oh, I'm going to do this genre, but it's like I'm doing this thing in my mind that actually is an inspired thing that existed as an element before, that if you try to do without the same amalgamation of choices, doesn't even come out to sound like it did. And that my whole quest is about trying to figure out what the choices were, not so much so that I could do them the way they did them, because I usually can't, but then to figure out, well, if that worked that way because of this, that means I could do this some other way that will also work. And so in sound design, that works out super cool, but with mixing, it's a difficult time. It's a bit like a lot of stuff really only sounds the way it does because it was done that way, and an alteration, what feels like things that can be altered end up just making it something else. And so like a big thing about track spacer and tools like it, tools that solve for N in ways that basically most of music production never had available as an option without nonsense, would all of a sudden, we were not using this tool. Like, we didn't have this power before, so like a lot of the things that we built to know, to feel, to understand don't have it as a texture or flavor in it. Doesn't mean that we can't use it. It just means that like you gotta do an undue amount of work to make it fit in a way that feels stylistically right, and it's usually to end up not doing the thing that's cool about it. And that, like, that's just what happens when you use something that's basically too new. And drum spacer is like that, and it's because the thing that we're doing with it has been done enough already with other tools that work a certain way that it's really just not going to sound like it. But there is definitely some future thing, some modern combination of elements that this will allow that will create something wholly new and specific and based on it, that eventually will have that texture,
be the new
as a
standard.
consequence.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting, man. So I guess
But that's not there yet. You know?
you and your Nostradamus predictions over here. You're like, oh, it's coming. It's coming. That's so you're saying it's not a bad tool to use. It's just that we haven't figured out how to achieve the perhaps loud, because we're basically talking about loudness here, to achieve like the old results that we did with this new tool. Because it just does it in a different enough way that it's changing the output.
It's just too perfect. And the thing about the light slit experiment is that it doesn't seem like it's related to talk about perfection, but the reason why that detection is possible is because the elements were as limited as possible, and that you can even notice things like the quantum variance and observation and that kind of shit.
Yeah.
And that, like, because it's all these like logic puzzles of, okay, well, if this is true, then that means if we don't do this, then this should still do the thing, right? And like it goes all the way down there, and like getting that far down then to find that out would be like that era scientist anger equivalent of being like, well, why did I do that? Why did I even go that far to figure this out? If like the answer basically is that there is no level lower enough to know to free it from that particular issue. So to have gone so far as to like do that last variable to get it that perfect just verified how much of a waste of time it was. And that, like, it's a little how I feel about stuff like track spacer, where because like here's just a random, like, you know, capacity for what it's for. It's like, okay, I have my synth, I have all my synths, my guitars, my basses, and I want to have also the loudest drum kit on earth that's like exactly as much power as all of that together, but obviously you can't do that. And then like the old school way of doing that would be to very meticulously make it fit, but track spacer says it could just do that, and it will, and it doesn't sound right. It sounds like you're listening to do two different things at once, but except it's actually coming out of the same signal instead of like you're playing two sound systems together. And you start to realize that like all of those individual meticulous choices actually were what the whole genre was. And like the fight they put up with to not use track spacer and had to do with it with whatever way they were doing was why it sounded like that. And to be more perfect than that is to exit the style.
Oh man, that's that's some deep shit right there.
It sounds like deep and philosophical, but it actually is like very intrinsic to just the raw doing the thing with your hands. Because if you end up as tools, they're phenomenal, but they're used for crazy, like, far out use cases, like the not so future shit. Basically, everything you ever done without it is already how you're supposed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that you would use these tools would be for things that you have not done before.
I see. You know what this
Not
kind
just
of...
doing the things you've done before more perfectly than ever before.
Oh, okay. You know what this kind of reminds me of is a little bit of like how we have these EV vehicles coming down the line, and the how the old ways. So you're saying not to forget the old ways of production. You know, it sounds like in that.
Yeah, it's not. That is what's up. And
Yeah.
the old ways are usually a limitation of power like this, like not having the ability to know that you had, like, being able to align phases perfectly. You know, that was something I encountered with Serum when I was making wavetables, is that if there's an option to just like make the phases perfect, but then also still have the level adjustment of whatever tone you were doing. And that kind of sounds like the thing you want. That sounds like exactly what would be like the coolest possible version of your thing.
Yeah.
But it makes everything come out sound like a saw wave.
Huh.
It just doesn't. It like immediately, because that's what perfect sounds like.
Yeah.
Duh.
Yeah.
Like that's where like you're just kind of like, oh, it's never really been about being perfect. It's been about specifically the exact like imperfections you have, and again, you know, the amalgamation of choices and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so but the electric car thing, that's real as fuck, because let me talk to you about owning a Kia Soul EV.
All right.
It says, like, it's not even just like we're talking about musical genres, like, oh, you know, mixing drums together with your stuff is a time period basically, and you don't even know until you have the new tech that's not based on any of it, and you're just butting up against it. You're like, wow, nothing is made for this.
Yeah.
And that's what it's like driving an EV, because all of the roads are curved for the reaction time of a manual or automatic explosive transmission. They're designed for the fact that when you hit the gas and the brakes and whatever, that there's an amount of delay before some shit happens. And like how big the curves are in roads are about that, and like the grades of the camber and all of that, everything. But electric cars don't have that problem. You tell it to do stuff and it does it immediately, and you end up having to like very manually drive the car in a way that you don't a regular vehicle, because the roads basically just drive your car for you, like if you're in a gas car most of the time. But meanwhile you're on your EV, and because your turning is so perfect, you have to have your hand, like, you're exactly controlling your dimensions of turning on like the most basic roads, because none of your momentum is aimed that way. Your momentum is aimed where your tires are pointing, and it's like having a way too accurate control, and you have no way of getting around it, because all of the things that make it less accurate in an internal combustion vehicle are the fact that there's like gyroscopic forces of spinning heavy ass shit in the front of you. And if your car doesn't have that, and you're driving on things on roads that are presuming that your car has that, then you're gonna have to like manually readjust for the fact that you're still living in the past.
So are you saying that driving a combustible engine is almost like enabling smoothing in Harmer?
It is. It does exactly that. It's a gyroscopic force.
Yeah.
It like prevents you from turning too hard, and it's also why the pistons are aimed the way they are on every single vehicle.
That's interesting. Wow. I didn't even think about all that stuff that you just told me, like the roads, like how the turns and the length of everything is designed for the combustible engine. So wait, have you driven this EV vehicle that you're talking about?
Yeah, it's my main car.
Okay.
And you know, at first it feels like a superpower. It feels like, oh my god, this car, it drives like a video game. It doesn't. It's ridiculous. But then like you do things like, you know, get on a highway, and you can really tell how highways are just kind of like a big roller coaster that's designed to shove internal combustion engines down, because that's how they act. And I just have to, like, you drive the EV, like if I put it on its like cruise control modes, I still have to very manually babysit it, because like the roads aren't made. They're not meant for that. But what's funny is that electric cars have the regenerative braking concept, where they get the flywheel going separate from the wheel that actually eats your energy in a way that brakes don't usually. because brakes will, stop, like, try to stop the rotation directly, but this actually just puts, like, reverse rotational energy wherever your wheels are aiming, which is the important part. And it's like having four-wheel reverse. It's very strange, but it makes the car kind of act like an internal combustion vehicle in certain circumstances, where like the momentum is like shaved off and aimed and regulated into weird directions. But like a lot of weird engineering had to go to do that, to make an electric car do that, and none of that weird engineering is even kind of thought of for any modern internal combustion vehicle, because it's resting on like 120 years of things being made for it.
Damn, that's crazy.
And that's what's up with the recording technology. Like the fact that the FL interface for looking at the audio stream still looks like a hardware mixer is basically what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Do you see that eventually changing and evolving to a more modern era?
And that's what Patcher is.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Patcher and like stuff like this track spacer things is like the EV concept of suddenly being like, well, now we have this technology to do this without having to care about that limitation. And that also means that now we also, like, it is just a matter of choice to adhere to the consequences of when that wasn't always true from like the 80s. Like, we're still living with the consequences of whatever was going on about like how things were recorded in the 80s for even synthesized things, because of just how shit had to work back then, like, because there wasn't computers. And that, like, even though now we don't live with any of the limitations that stuff does, if we make a song that kind of exceeds those bounds, it doesn't sound like it anymore. It has some other angle or tinge to it,
Man. This conversation.
So here you are doing this like halftime stuff, and like it's pretty modern, but it's still not that modern. It's not. We're still talking about a basically dubstep, which is a genre from 2009.
Yeah.
So my personal moral of the story is that I wouldn't try too hard to like leverage what could possibly consider to be like average or universal perfection in any angle to try and like be like, let's do this. And at least if you're going to use these tools, then you want to actually do the thing that's hard, which is to inject your personal arbitrary touch.
Yeah. It's like, it'd be funny is if like I added like 50 million track spacers, 50 million match EQs. I'm like, yo, Seamless, check out this track, and I play. It's just a fucking saw wave.
Yeah, it completely fixed every imperfection. It absolutely,
it's perfect.
Everything it's just a solid note.
It's like, look, dude, this turned all my kicks, everything into the perfect saw wave. Basically, it just turned it into an instance of phase plant.
Yep.
Oh man, it's pretty funny. Hey, I was thinking a funny name for a plugin. Since we're in the age where we have these plugins that can basically turn mud into perfection, right? Now's a great time to release a plugin called Turd Polisher. That you can turn anything, even a turd, into something nice.
That's coming.
Yeah,
like, there's already like stable diffusion based AI stuff for audio that's basically talking about that. Like, here's this, make it Skrillex, and like it does.
That's almost depressing though, I think.
Well, I could see how some people might care about this, but as someone in a position, because like what I've always wanted and tried to do is even in sacrificing of ever actually making a piece of music, I'm always trying to do whatever's like the absolute newest, craziest, dumbest thing that's like the bleedingest edge. And no AI is ever gonna do that. No AI is gonna like math out the human trying to be new. What they will do is do what humans have already done, like really well. And that I just don't care. Like I just brought up the Skrillex thing. Like, it would have mattered to Zomboy if this was real when Skrillex was new, and that like anyone could just have done that, and that wouldn't have mattered. Therefore, that he would have had like his textural, his value. But like to now, like that's going to be super awesome for someone like me, because then I can just be like, oh, here's some wildly new shit. Like here, make it more like a normal song. Like do the opposite. Like make it more normal so I don't have to.
Yeah. Yeah, that was interesting that you said that AI is essentially it takes what, because all the purpose of AI is to appeal basically to human taste, right? Like we're trying to make the world more appealing and to less work for us, so that we can have more time to enjoy ourselves or whatever, and damn it, I kind of lost my point here of what I was trying to say. Just that, yeah, no, AI, everything, AI, is it really going to, I don't know if I can say this, but we make it to adjust to what we like, right? But we're always coming up with new things that we like, and AI is just basically a massive pool of everything that we've ever done, right? So it's almost like, it's sort of like match EQ. It's trying to like match our taste, right? But it's not necessarily creating anything new. I don't know.
It's definitionally not creating anything at all.
Yeah.
And like whenever you hear someone who makes like an artist, like a human artist, comes out and makes something new and goes like, oh, this is neat, and like someone is like, this is like a carbon copy of exactly some things that have already existed, and the guy comes back and is like, well, of course I was inspired by that, and like that's everything. Like there's nothing that's not that. And that what that'll mean though is like an AI can only do that with reference, the same way that you do, the same way that whatever it is you're doing kind of sounds like things you've heard before. That wasn't going to happen unless you heard the things that happened before.
Yeah.
And that, like, cool, good. That AI basically being able to like recreate stuff that's already happening, I don't see that as being as big a deal as like the thought of an AI potentially replacing actual like ingenuity and new creation, which, like, for a human, you can't tell if that's happening or not. You can't tell if like they really are trying to like they were in a cave and they had never seen those inspirations, and they themselves just generated the brand new concept to them.
Yeah.
Like you don't know if a person does that or not, but you know intrinsically that the AI is not doing that. That the AI is only making things that are made of things it's seen in reference.
Yeah.
And like what is it? And what I think like what's going to turn out is that we're going to discover exactly how deep like what we think human creativity is, because once AIs do that a few times, they're going to see some patterns that are basically going to like collapse entire art industries as to be shown to be not even kind of creative, and that like good force us to try.
Yeah, that's a great point actually. I was looking at, and that's kind of goes along the lines of NFTs, I think, where there's just an overabundance of like this perfected art that somebody was showing like a way of how to make an image really fast, basically just shitting out mass producing copies of great looking art, but it's like what makes something valuable is its rarity, like the less
right. So at first the rare thing is the creation of, even if it is a recreation of something that's already awesome, just because it's still rare. But if an AI can just be like, look, if you want Skrillex from 2020 again, here it is, like as though he never lost his laptop, like that, cool. But all of a sudden what that'll mean is that like the actual value of the literal content that we're talking about, which would have been awesome if that was real at the time, all of a sudden is not. And it's, some people, I can see that from a trades perspective as being devastating, but from just like a real art creativity perspective, it's going to be like the slaying of unoriginal failure. It will force everything everywhere to, like, you basically can't exist professionally without a capacity to overcome all of original human art, because that's what like AI is going to be, is competition. Like, you either can make something totally brand new, or you lose against a robot that contains the entire history of human thought.
This kind of makes me an analogy to bodybuilding. It feels like essentially like where we're approaching is if bodybuilding competitions just started, AI started churning out Arnold Schwarzenegger clones left and right, or modern, like, you know, freaking Mike O'Hearns or freaking whoever's on the top right now.
Arnold was a ridiculous accomplishment as a human, and like I mean honestly, if there was still like if like all of a sudden there were 10 million Arnolds, like that's still ridiculous individually, but that would, as like a value to anyone outside of that thing happening, that would diminish wildly. Like there would not be a call or a demand for like the Arnold archetype in like movies, for example,
No,
because it would be considered the common thing.
You know what 10 million Arnolds is? That's called Skynet.
Yeah, we did that. We already told that story.
Yeah, we already told. It becomes a whole new use at that point. But yeah, no, yeah, and like I would think like if you did have all those Arnolds, right? That then you would need something, these new bodybuilders to compete against that to like really stand out somehow, you know?
And you know, they're either gonna find a way, or essentially we'll say, okay, cool, well, we solved bodybuilding. Like we literally solved. We know all of its corners. We know all of its what's possible, and here is perfect. Good job.
Yeah, and you know it's interesting that's kind of a telltale sign of the human condition, in that we're always trying to uncover all avenues and paths, and then once we solve the problem, we're like, okay, cool, we're bored, what's next, you know? We're always like, what's next?
We do like our narratives, right? And one of the narratives that we like a lot is this thought of like the individualist super inventor, this person who can like come up with stuff. But what's weird about like here we are being musical people, and like you almost can copyright almost nothing about music, and also anyone anywhere in any bar has the legal authority to play as covers anything they want ever. And like that life actually makes kind of more money than being an original producer, even though what we're just talking about is that being an original producer is not necessarily an exercise in originality. And that, like, what that kind of means is that like I think we actually already agree on a certain value in terms of like what actually is original or not. But what we lack is enough people who really want to do the thing, like performers, players, like actual people who want to go out and do this whatever. And a lot, when you see this, a lot, like, you know, like cops, like the way that gets solved is that there tends to be like a hero myth around the thing, like a legend that's attractive to whoever would want to engage in it. And like the legend of being the super cool, you know, rock star, that's what gets music going, right? But now imagine if AI comes around and actually perfectly solves for the desire to have like music perform, which like that'd be a fucking feat. But if it did, imagine like what that would do is that suddenly they're just like basically as many people who wanted to be musicians would already. But I think that like the legal authority to like have control over music would just vanish. Like the thought that like music could be owned, period, because none of it is original, that like that goes out the window the second like there's enough like AI generative and performance based reality that like we don't have to care about like corralling humans to do it.
Yeah, we would have to essentially give up at that point of trying to control that, you know?
Like, I think we have already given up. Like,
really?
Because of the thing about how the way rights work for, like, performances and venues. Like, that could really only exist out of an agreement that music is not something that people own. And that it's a thing that, like, a person can change and a person can perform. But nothing about what we can do enough of original to really be something that we call ours. And it's going to really be proven when AI just does it. Like when AI completely is like, yeah, here it is, here's all the stuff you're going to do, and then like all listeners and people are not going to give a damn. Because they already don't give a damn. They don't really care about what goes on in the DJ booth. And like the whole how sad some of the DJ culture is about how basic it is another symptom of the fact that people just don't care. So when like AI comes around and perfectly delivers like a desire for musical taste just whenever, however that people want it, whatever, like the big apparatus around trying to get people to do it will go away. Like the weird predatory super natures of labels, the hero worship around like the rock star life, like that is just gonna go, because most of it is a lie, and that kind of tends to wreck people when they go through it and realize that.
Wow. Crazy, man. It's part of me is like nervous about the future, and then part of me is like excited. It's I don't know, it's like I got a mixed bag of emotions about all this. But yeah, it's like but change is inevitable, you know, so it's just better for me to embrace what's coming, but you know.
Yeah, like I bring up the DJ thing, and one thing that I would imagine was like the intention when they moved out of manual beat matching into having like a sync-based lifestyle. That the thought is, well, now you can do more. Now you can do things that you couldn't have done a while ago. But the thing is that all the people still wanted was still the style that was based on not doing that. So that meant that like they didn't get more complicated; they just got more boring.
Yeah. Shit, man. Well, it looks like we have reached the hour mark, so I guess we're at a good stopping point. But definitely cool conversation we had, man. I always appreciate your deep insight in everything you have to share, because it's crazy. Like you just go. It's funny because I think you were talking to me at one point or something like that. We were joking about something, but you had said how like you'll get on a topic and you'll just go, man. You'll you'll just go, and that's cool, man. Because I appreciate that, because I just kind of sit here and listen, and it just like starts to pour into my brain. It's almost like a lecture, you know. It feels educational to me.
It is a lecture. It is definitely a lecture.
But I definitely
got good at.
Yeah, but I dig that stuff, because I remember when I was in paramedic school, I reached this. It's a little hard for me at first to grab onto the conversation when people are doing educational stuff, but usually what I try and do is find points that are like, oh, that was really interesting, which isn't hard. It's just I got to get my like focus going with what they're talking about. But then once I'm in it, I kind of get in the groove, and I just sit and listen, man, and absorb everything. So it's just like, and then I get out and like, whoa, I feel so much more intelligent after having listened to the conversation. So I get that with you. So
well, good. I'm glad my lectures are functional.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So anyway, man, but I'll see you around, and I guess maybe next week or whenever next live stream. So
yeah, man, you have a fine rest of your day.
Peace. Later.
Later.